You write that the great intellectual property now is not physics but biology, and that many of the bioweaponeers who worked in the Soviet Union are available more or less on the world market. You quote one fellow who's now living in Virginia, who's changed his name to Ken Alabek, and he says for $1,000 a month, that's a lot of money for one of these guys, and we assume they could travel and advise some bad-acting countries someplace.
You know, what struck me as I went through the biological warfare apparatus in the former Soviet countries is that no one can account for the presence of most of those scientists. It was an enormous enterprise. Some 50,000 people were involved in some way in the production and testing of biological weapons in the former Soviet Union. Americans had no idea this was going on, and now we can really only account for handfuls of those scientists. British intelligence insists, and was quite open with me, saying they have evidence that some of these individuals have in fact turned up in Iraq and in Iran. There were allegations made that they were in Sudan and Libya as well. We don't know now with North Korea where that stands, but right now a great deal of uncertainty reigns, and I have to say that in the biological warfare and bioterrorism meetings that I go to, it would be, I'm not sure I can exactly capture emotionally how the scientists who really know this field feel at this time. They feel that they are so much more aware of the danger than the society as a whole is, that it makes them very, very nervous and very anxious, and they're tremendously worried about this.
These are scientists who in the past, you point out, in the past have been very circumspect and not wanting to talk about it very much because they would scare people, number one, and number two, provide scenarios for terrorists, but it's all pretty much all over with now.
I think that there is now a kind of a mentality amongst a lot of biologists that is similar to the way many physicists felt after Hiroshima. A sort of sudden awareness that the great revolution in intellectual understanding that has allowed them to understand basic principles of biology has also allowed evil-minded individuals to manipulate basic biology in really, truly terrifying ways. And I think that those who really contemplate these matters and put a lot of energy into it are very, very frightened about the future in this area.
Let's talk about smallpox itself. Can smallpox be delivered by, let's say, a Scud missile? Is that possible? Do people envision that scenario?
The Russian scientists, Kazakhstani scientists, and so on who were involved in the Soviet program claim yes, and it's already been done. They've effectively done it in test sites out in the Aral Sea, and it's really no problem. Since smallpox can be aerosolized, and it apparently is a fairly stable virus as viruses go, it was simply a matter of dealing with heat and pressure and making a living organism stay alive under the kind of heat and pressure that would be involved in missile delivery. And the Russians claim that they in fact succeeded in overcoming those two problems.
Smallpox has, you say, a 30% kill rate. I have, as many of us do, a smallpox vaccination scar from many years ago on my arm. Am I not immune to smallpox?
You're probably not immune anymore. Or if you have any immunity, it's rather weak and waning because your body has not been challenged and re-exposed to the virus at any time in your life since the point at which you were vaccinated.
Well, why don't countries vaccinate for smallpox anymore?
Because we eradicated it, or so we thought. We had eliminated all naturally occurring smallpox in the world. The last human case of smallpox was identified and treated in 1977. And so we officially declared smallpox the great public health victory of the 20th century, and it was. More people died of smallpox in the 20th century than all wars combined, and eradicating it was truly a grand, victorious triumph for public health. What we didn't realize then was that the saved samples of smallpox viruses that were kept just in case there might be a reemergence, there might be something somebody missed in the natural environment, and we might need those supplies to hurriedly make vaccines or some such thing. we hadn't realized that some people had, in fact, manipulated those supplies for deliberate release purposes.
Let me take you back to a story you described. In the late 1940s, a traveler from Mexico comes to New York City, spreads smallpox by contact, I assume, and all of a sudden, 6.35 million New Yorkers are successfully vaccinated. That was 50 years ago. Could that happen now?
No. No. If someone were to walk amongst the residents of Gotham or Los Angeles or Paris carrying smallpox, public health authorities anywhere in the entire world would be hard-pressed to come up with a rapid response. We have no really truly efficacious, safe supplies of smallpox vaccine available for civilian use at this time, and there's no rapid attempt underway to, in fact, mass-produce smallpox vaccine. We don't even have a good supply for our military forces.
Your book is about public health, and with regard to this sort of epidemic, where does public health fit in? How do you define public health? What's the role there?
Public health is about the health of populations, not individuals, populations. Medicine's about the health of individuals. And it is the role of public health and public health authorities to notice if there's some sort of a trend afoot, if something is happening in society, and to respond quickly for the protection of the community as a whole. Whether that be that something's in the drinking water, something's in the air, something's in the food, or a significant percentage of children suddenly are not appropriately immunized. This is a job for public health. And were there to be some sort of a biological terrorism or warfare incident that was not announced, sort of, hello, I just released anthrax, I thought you should know that, the most likely scenario is that it would first be noticed by physicians and emergency response personnel, ambulance drivers, those sorts of folks. And they wouldn't notice that until a considerable amount of time after the agent had been released, because people would be incubating the illness for a few days before you would start to see that a lot of people were suddenly coming into emergency rooms with what looked like the flu or something flu-like that could not be easily diagnosed. And it would be noticed in scattered sites. Eventually, somebody would contact the public health authorities, and they would begin to do a survey quickly of emergency rooms and doctors' offices, inquiring, are you seeing an unusual situation? And once it looked like indeed there was something afoot, it would be the public health machinery that would step in to respond, to run the lab tests and figure out what it was, to send out the bulletins to every single hospital and every single medical provider in the community. Law enforcement wouldn't get into the picture until well down the road, when you already had many people infected and you already had basically an epidemic underway.
The title of your book, though, is Betrayal of Trust, the Collapse of Global Public Health. Are you saying that the public health service in this country is not equipped for the kind of scenario we're talking about?
No, it is not, nor is the public health system of any nation we could name. The kinds of threats that public health now faces are unprecedented, and it was never prepared for such a threat. Furthermore, public health all across the world, and especially here in the United States, has suffered so many budget cuts and so many reductions in staff that we're really hard-pressed to meet even the basic challenges that we face every day, much less something as extraordinary as a bioterrorism event.
Ms. Garrett, thank you for talking with us.
Thank you.
Laurie Garrett, her book is titled Betrayal of Trust, the Collapse of Global Public Health. Ms. Garrett is a health and science writer for Newsday.
Jazz singer Helen Merrill looks back to her roots. That's ahead.
Programming on Jazz 88 is made possible in part by our members and Onondaga.
Bass in the treble, there's dust on your needle and you think that you're a rebel.
On drums. Never let me go.
To print our coffee from 20 to 65 pages a minute on the network. To scan.
We did the Gong Show this year, something even funkier, where people come up and And speaking of used cars, you'll find a quality selection of Mazdas,